My sister's surgery was going to cost $500,000. I knelt outside my actress wife's Hollywood Hills mansion, begging her in the pouring rain to advance me a year's salary. After all, I had spent exactly 365 days playing the part of her loving, deceased husband. On the video call, she was nestled in the arms of her white whale, the man who had supposedly died and come back to life. Her voice was colder than the rain. Our contract is over. She hung up. Behind me, my sister was lying in the ICU. The curve on her heart monitor was about to flatline. The stand-in awakens. At 5 a.m., the smart home system punctually blasted Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries. The music was grandiose and rousing, with an undeniable power that could drag any slumbering soul from the mire of their dreams. It was Julian Croft's favorite music to wake up to. I opened my eyes. The elaborate crystal chandelier on the ceiling was still dark. Only a sliver of cold, gray pre-dawn light slipped through the gap in the curtains. My body woke up before my brain did, moving like a robot programmed through countless repetitions. I automatically sat up, got out of bed, and walked toward the bathroom. The mirror reflected a young face. The features were reasonably handsome, especially the eyes, which remained clear even in the dim light. But the owner of this face carried a weariness and numbness that defied his age. This face was about 70% identical to Julian Croft's. It was the only reason I was allowed to live in this 9-figure mansion. I, Caleb Shaw, a D-list actor, was currently employed to impersonate a dead man. After washing up, I walked into the closet, a space that could rival a luxury boutique. An entire wall was filled with white shirts, all from the same Italian custom brand, every single one identical in cut and style. It was Julian's favorite. I took one down, put on with practiced ease, fastened the cufflinks, and then strapped on the Patek Philippe watch. The band had already worn a faint mark onto the inside of my wrist, like an invisible shackle. Everything was ready, save for the final, most crucial step. I picked up the bottle of perfume from a vanity. It was minimalist in design, but outrageously expensive, the glass etched with a single line of cursive, Aurora's Love. It was Julian Croft's signature scent, custom-made by France's top perfumer, the only one of its kind in the world. Just as I picked up the bottle, a mechanical, electronic voice chimed on schedule inside my head. Ding! The professional stand-in's survival guide has been activated. Today's main quest: maintain character. Play the part of the devoted, deceased husband. Scent concentration analysis. Aurora's Love, perfume remaining at 78%. Concentration is low. Please replenish immediately. Warning: if the boss is unable to detect the standard concentration of the soul scent upon approach, you will be classified as a defective counterfeit, and the Ice Queen penalty mode will be triggered. I sighed and meticulously sprayed my wrists and neck. The cool liquid enveloped me in a complex fragrance, both crisp and warm. I had been smelling this for a full year. It was as familiar as my own body odor. Or rather, it had replaced my own smell entirely. Only after completing this ritual did I dare to leave the room. The long hallway was silent, the thick carpet swallowing any sound of my footsteps. The walls were adorned with priceless works of art, but the whole mansion felt as cold and empty as a museum. In the dining room, the world outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows was still a hazy gray. On the long dining table, only a single breakfast was set. I sat down and began to mechanically add coffee beans to the grinder. This was Julian's habit. Just then, a figure appeared at the dining room entrance like a ghost. Isabel Vance. Today, she wore a long black silk dress that made her skin appear even paler, like the finest cold-cast porcelain. Her face, hailed as a myth in Hollywood, was breathtakingly beautiful and as cold as a glacier that had stood for 10,000 years. She didn't look at me, nor did she approach the table. She just stood there, her perfect brows furrowed slightly, her nose twitching in the air as if trying to identify a scent. My heart leaped in my throat. "The perfume," she said coldly, her voice devoid of any warmth. "It smells wrong." My hand, holding the coffee mug, tightened. "It's too new," she continued, her gaze empty as it stared in my direction, yet it felt like she was looking through me at someone else. "It hasn't blended with his body heat." A cold sweat instantly beaded on my back. Damn it, the old bottle had just run out yesterday. This was a new one I had just opened. I thought the scent would be identical, but I never imagined she could detect such a subtle difference. She finally walked over and pushed a glass of warm milk in front of me. Her movement was elegant, but it carried an undeniable command. He hated drinking coffee on an empty stomach. "Did you forget?" I screamed internally. Frustrated employee. JPG. "Dude, Page 73 of the manual clearly states he liked a cup of black coffee in the morning to wake up. Has the software been updated again? Who's the product manager? I'm going to send them a box of spiders. We workers need updated documentation too. But on my face, I could only display the perfect amount of remorse and apology. I am sorry. I misremember. Isabel didn't look at me again, nor did she show any intention of sitting down to eat. She turned, leaving me with her cold back. Spend the entire day in your room. Reread the manual 100 times. With that, she disappeared down the hall. In the vast dining room, I was left alone with the warm milk and the still-running coffee machine. The aroma of coffee mixed with the faint tang of milk smelled, just like my life right now. Absurd and nauseating. System alert. Warning. Host is going OOC, out of character. Please immediately remove the villainous plant, cilantro, from your mouth. Otherwise, the film queen's affinity score will decrease by 10, and tonight's chicken dinner will be confiscated. Oh, right. I forgot to mention, Julian Croft hated cilantro. And I, a born and bred Texan, felt that a bowl of chili without cilantro was a sacrilege against the soul. Unfortunately, my soul, along with my name, Caleb Shaw, had long been locked away by the $10 million penalty clause in my stand-in contract. The memory shackles. Back in my room, I resignedly picked up the 300-page manual of Julian Croft's habits and behaviors. This Bible, comparable to the Oxford English Dictionary, detailed everything from Julian's dietary preferences and clothing style to his tone of voice, his posture when walking, and even whether he tilted his head to the left or right when kissing Isabel Vance. Every single rule I had to know by heart and execute flawlessly. I opened the first page. On it was a promotional photo of Julian Croft. The man in the picture was handsome and confident, radiating the aura of a superstar, as if he were born to live in the spotlight. And I was just his shoddy, perfume-scented shadow after his death. I sighed and began to recite. Julian Croft hates overcast days because they make him feel depressed. Julian Croft likes to drink a hand-poured Yirgachev at 3 p.m. The beans must be flown in that day. System prompt. Host's mental state is poor. Recreational activity suggested. Option A. Play 100 cheesy pickup lines on a loop in your head. Option B. Start a virtual poker game in your head. Option C. Watch the film queen's latest movie and write a review of no less than 800 words, imitating Julian Croft's tone. Without hesitation, I chose B. Just as I was mentally slamming down a royal flush, there was a knock on my door. It was the butler, Arthur's voice. Sir, it's time for the young master's story. I immediately shot up from the bed, straightened my clothes, and practiced Julian Croft's gentle smile 3 times in the mirror before stepping out. The young master, Leo Vance, was Isabel and Julian's son. 5 years old, he looked like an exquisite porcelain doll, too beautiful to be real. He had also been diagnosed with emotional detachment disorder. Leo's playroom was 3 times the size of the entire basement apartment I used to rent, filled with the most expensive toys from around the world. Right now, he was sitting amidst a pile of Legos, expressionlessly assembling a starship of exceedingly complex design. He completely ignored my arrival, as if I were nothing but a puff of air. Following the manual's instructions, I sat on the rug beside him, cleared my throat, and began to narrate, in a gentle and magnetic Julian-like voice, the heroic tale of Julian's childhood battle with a vicious dog to protect the little girl next door. I had practiced this story no less than 100 times. The intonation of every word and the rhythm of every pause were aimed at a perfect replica. I was telling it with great emotion, right at the climax, when Leo suddenly stopped what he was doing. He looked up, his unnaturally beautiful eyes staring blankly at me, and said in a calm tone that was utterly incongruous with his age, "The therapist told me this story 8 times. The tutor told it 12 times. Mom told it 3 times while I was falling asleep." He paused, his small finger pointing at me, and continued, "You are the 24th time." My performance froze on my face. An awkward silence filled the air. System prompt. Impersonation failed. Target has developed immunity to standard script. Host, please explore new strategies. Warning. Failure to complete the daily parent-child interaction quest will result in a 50% deduction of today's pay. Looking at Leo's placid little face, I felt a profound sense of powerlessness for the first time. I could imitate a dead man, but I couldn't move a living, breathing child. Perhaps, in his eyes, I was no different from the therapists and tutors, just another person executing a program task. And he was long tired of the program. A touch of truth after dinner. My task was to put Leo to sleep. I sat by his soft bed, watching him lie under the covers, his big eyes staring at the ceiling, showing no signs of sleepiness. My mind was a blank. The selection of Julian Croft's bedtime stories from the manual now seemed utterly ridiculous. After a long silence, I gave up. I gave up on imitating, on acting. I switched back to my own voice and spoke softly. Leo, how about I tell you a different kind of story? Leo didn't respond, but he didn't object either. So I just started talking. When I was a kid, the place I lived was really run down, an old tenement building. Whenever it rained, the roof would leak. My mom would put out a bunch of pots and pans to catch the water. The dripping sounds, plink, plunk, were like a special kind of concert. I have a sister, too, a little older than you. She was terrified of thunder. Every time it thundered, she'd cry her eyes out. I'd run over and cover her ears, then sing her our local, off-key nursery rhymes. I sang horribly, but she'd listen and stop crying, and sometimes she'd even laugh at me. I was talking about my own childhood, all the poverty and hardship, yet so full of life. These stories weren't glamorous, nor did they fit Julian Croft's elite persona. But I noticed that Leo's eyes were open the whole time, listening quietly. His gaze seemed to flicker with a faint ripple, no longer the pure emptiness from before. I got a little lost in the memories and continued. 1 year for my sister's birthday, she really wanted this big stuffed doll from a toy store window. But our family didn't have the money. So I entered a watermelon eating contest the community center was holding. The prize for first place was that doll. I ate like my life depended on it, stuffed myself until I almost threw up, and I finally won it. When I brought the doll home to my sister, she was so happy she couldn't sleep all night. Even though I had an upset stomach for 3 days from all the watermelon, I thought it was totally worth it. As I said this, I smiled a genuine smile. And then I saw something incredible. The corners of Leo's mouth, those lips that were always pressed into a tight, straight line, actually curved upward in a barely perceptible arc. It was so small, it was almost negligible, and it lasted for less than half a second. My heart felt like it had been gently nudged by something. Ding! Congratulations, host, for triggering the hidden side quest, a real childhood. Precious child Leo's emotional resonance, progress plus 0. 1%. Quest reward, 10 system store points, can be redeemed for 1 hour of internal monologue freedom. For once, the system notification in my head sounded almost pleasant. I looked at Leo. He had already closed his eyes, his breathing growing steady. Perhaps, for a child starved of emotion, the perfectly crafted tales of heroic deeds were far less moving than a real childhood full of clumsiness and embarrassing moments. Because truth, in itself, carries a certain warmth. Emotional fissures for the next few days, Isabel was overseas attending a major film festival. With her gone, the air in the mansion seemed to lighten. My days consisted of memorizing the manual and spending time with Leo. I stopped telling him Julian's stories and instead dredged up my own childhood, sharing everything from climbing trees to raybirds' nests and getting stung by bees, to catching fish in the river and getting pinched by crabs. Leo remained mostly expressionless, but when I told stories, he would put down his toys and watch me with focus. Sometimes he would ask strange questions. "What's a counterfeit?" he asked out of the blue one day. It took me a second to realize he must have heard the word somewhere. I thought about it and said, "A counterfeit is something that's fake, something made to imitate the real thing." "Are you Papa's counterfeit?" he asked, his eyes as clear as a spring. The question was a sharp knife, stabbing precisely into my most hidden wound. I stretched the corners of my mouth into a smile that was uglier than a grimace. "Yeah," I answered in a low voice. "I'm a counterfeit." Leo tilted his head, seemingly in thought, then asked, "Can you eat a counterfeit?" His wild imagination made me chuckle, and the ache in my heart dissipated. "No, you can't eat them," I said, ruffling his hair. "The purpose of a counterfeit is probably to make people who miss the real thing feel a little better when it's not around." Leo nodded as if he half understood and said no more. That night, a massive thunderstorm hit the city. Huge raindrops hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, making a percussive racket. Streaks of lightning tore across the night sky, illuminating the mansion in a ghastly white light, followed by deafening claps of thunder. I was lying in bed, calculating how much more money I needed for my sister's surgery next month, when I suddenly heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. It was the nanny, Maria. She knocked anxiously on my door. "Mr. Shaw, something's wrong. The young master. He has a high fever." My heart seized. I shot out of the room. In Leo's room, his small body was curled up under the blankets, burning hot and shivering uncontrollably. His face was flushed, and he was moaning in discomfort. There was a pool of vomit beside the bed. "Where's the family doctor?" I asked urgently. I called. But the rain is too heavy. The roads are flooded. The doctor said his car can't get through. It will be at least 2 hours. Maria was on the verge of tears. Watching Leo's suffering, the contractual prohibition against excessive physical contact with my employer's child was instantly thrown to the wind. "Get warm water and towels. And rubbing alcohol." I yelled at Maria as I shrugged off my jacket. For the rest of the night, I stayed by Leo's side. I wiped his body down with warm water again and again, tried to bring his temperature down. His gastroenteritis had flared up, and he threw up several times, once directly on me. I didn't have time to change, just silently cleaned up the mess and continued to hold his trembling body. When the thunder roared, he would instinctively burrow into my arms. Just like I used to comfort my sister, I held him tight, covered his ears, and hummed that same off-key nursery rhyme. "Moonlight, moonlight, shining bright, on the barn so empty tonight." My voice was hoarse from stress and exhaustion, and the tune was atrocious. But the little boy in my arms slowly quieted down. Late into the night, his fever finally started to break. Worried his stomach was upset, I relied on my experience taking care of my sister and went to the kitchen. Using the little bit of ginger and brown sugar I could find, I made him a small bowl of stomach-warming ginger tea. I carried the bowl back to his room, blew on each spoonful until it was cool, and carefully fed it to him. He drank half the bowl, taking small sips while resting in my arms. As dawn approached, the rain lessened, and the family doctor finally arrived. After an examination, he said the worst was over and Leo just needed a rest. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Exhausted from the sleepless night, I was about to collapse. I leaned against the headboard and drifted off. In my sleep, I felt something soft gently brushing against the back of my hand. I groggily opened my eyes and saw Leo, lying on his side, rubbing his small cheek against my hand over and over. The gesture was clumsy and tentative, like a kitten just learning to show affection. At that moment, the morning light broke through the clouds and streamed into the room, landing on his long eyelashes and coating them in a golden halo. My heart was struck, once again with a gentle blow. What I didn't know was that on the other side of the world, Isabel Vance was watching everything through the mansion's security cameras. She saw me clumsily but gently taking care of her son. She saw me get thrown up on without a flicker of disgust. She saw me hold Leo all night, humming a tune she had never heard before. Finally, she saw Leo, after his fever broke, initiate a gesture of affection towards someone other than her for the first time. On the monitor, her son, who was always so cold and withdrawn, was nestled against the counterfeit like a small animal relying on its owner. Isabel's heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. A strange emotion, something like being moved, mixed with the frustration and unease of this loss of control, kept her awake all night. The Glacier Melt's Isabel returned from abroad. She had won the Best Actress award at that prestigious film festival, becoming the youngest Triple Crown winner in the country, her fame at its absolute peak. The day she came back, she arrived alone, dragging her suitcase into the mansion. As was protocol, I went to take her luggage. But instead of ignoring me and walking past as usual, she stopped and looked at me. Her expression was complex, no longer purely ice-cold, but filled with something I couldn't decipher. "Now, thank you," she said softly. It was the first time she had ever used the word thank you with me. I was a bit overwhelmed, quickly replying, it was my duty. That night, for the first time, she asked me to watch a movie with her. In the enormous private theater, the screen was playing Julian Croft's final film. In it, Julian was full of life and radiated a dazzling charisma. Isabel watched intently, without a word. In the darkness, I could smell the Aurora's love perfume on her, the same scent I wore, but hers was mixed with the faint aroma of alcohol. Halfway through the movie, I felt a weight on my shoulder. I froze. Isabel was resting her head on my shoulder. Her hair was soft and cool, tickling my neck. Every muscle in my body tensed. I didn't dare move. The alarm in my head was blaring. Red alert. Boss has initiated physical contact. Heart rate detected. 125 BPM. Body temperature rising. Adrenaline surging. Host at risk of exposing non-performance state. Immediate activation of Julian Croft devotion mode required. I frantically tried to recall the chapter in the manual on how to handle spontaneous affection from Isabel, but my mind was a total blank. He used to. Isabel's voice was very soft, tinged with an imperceptible weariness and vulnerability as it floated through the darkness, like to lean on me like this. So that's what it was. The tiny ripple that had just formed in my heart instantly subsided. I relaxed, letting her lean on me. I was just a substitute, a tool to help her reminisce. I should have known that all along. By the time the movie ended, she had fallen asleep. Her breathing was even like a child's. I hesitated for a long time, but ultimately decided not to wake her. I just maintained that position and sat there all night. The next morning, when she woke up and found herself on my shoulder, a flicker of awkwardness crossed her face. She quickly reverted to her icy demeanor, stood up, and smoothed out her clothes. Just as she was about to leave, she turned back, as if on a whim, and asked, "Your sisters. Surgery funds. How much are you still short?" I was stunned. It was the first time she had ever asked about Caleb Shaw's personal life. My heart shamelessly skipped a beat. For a fleeting moment, an absurd warmth bloomed inside me. I thought things were getting better. I thought that maybe I, the counterfeit, could earn the right to be treated like a human being. But I was wrong. The storm always gathers when the sea is at its calmest. The business channels began to report nonstop about a mysterious multinational investment firm, K Capital, preparing to make a major move into the domestic market. In the news, the enigmatic figurehead, known only as Mr. K, never showed his face. There was only one shot of his silhouette, seen from the window of a private jet. The line of his jaw was sharp and familiar. Isabel's best friend, the A-list comedian Chloe Reed, was doing a face mask and eating chips when she saw the news. She shot up from the couch, pointing at the screen, a strange feeling of dread washing over her. That profile, why did it look so much like? She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. She had me seeing things. Dead men don't come back to life. Return of the Dead. A week later, a business gala dubbed the Party of the Century was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, drawing in a crowd of business magnates and top-tier celebrities. Isabel, as a shareholder of Zenith Pictures and the night's main guest, was in attendance, dressed to kill. She wore a crimson couture gown, her long hair swept up to reveal the elegant curve of her neck. The moment she entered, she captured everyone's attention. The climax of the evening was the first public appearance of the mysterious Mr. K, the head of K Capital. Everyone craned their necks, waiting for the legendary figure who had shaken up global markets to finally show himself. At 9 p.m. sharp, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the entrance of the ballroom, flanked by a retinue of bodyguards in black. A tall, imposing figure slowly walked in. He wore a perfectly tailored bespoke suit and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, a faint, unreadable smile playing on his lips. His face was handsome, but carried a slight stiffness, the telltale sign of restorative surgery. It did nothing to diminish the powerful, commanding aura that surrounded him. This was K. He walked straight through the crowd, ignoring all the elites who tried to engage him, and finally stopped right in front of Isabel Vance. Every eye in the room was fixed on them. Isabel stared at the man before her, both familiar and strange. Her heart pounded, an absurd and unbelievable thought taking root in her mind. The man looked at her and, slowly, enunciated each word in a voice that was raspy and sexy from surgery, speaking a line that was a secret known only to the two of them. "Isabel, have the blue roses I planted for you bloomed?" Boom! Isabel's mind went completely blank. The blood in her veins felt like it froze, only to come rushing back a second later. She stared at him, her lips trembling, unable to form a single word. The man smiled and slowly took off his glasses. Behind them was a pair of eyes that were world-weary, but still held a gaze so deep and loving it could drown a person. She would never mistake those eyes. "It's me," the man said softly. "I'm back. Julian Croft." He was alive. The entire hall erupted in chaos. "Julian," Isabel's voice was trembling uncontrollably, tears instantly streaming from her eyes. Julian stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, then began to tell the crowd of reporters and cameras a story that could only be described as legendary. A story about how, 5 years ago, he hadn't died in the car crash but was kidnapped by business rivals, held captive, disfigured, and rendered mute. How he had escaped through sheer willpower, painstakingly rebuilt his life abroad, and finally established his own financial empire to return and exact his revenge. The story was 90% fabrication, 10% truth. But to Isabel at that moment, it didn't matter. The overwhelming ecstasy of having him back consumed all her reason and composure. She couldn't hear anything else. She could only cling to the man before her, as if he would disappear again the moment she let go. Under the watchful eyes of the world, she embraced her resurrected lover. This scene, broadcast live across all major media outlets, appeared on the television screen in the mansion. I was sitting on the couch, peeling an apple for Leo. The The voices from the TV made me pause. I looked up and saw the embrace, the kiss. I saw the look of unbridled, ecstatic joy on Isabel's face, a look I had never seen before. And I saw the man's face. Even with the plastic surgery, even with his aura now dark and brooding, I recognized it. It was the face I had imitated for an entire year. The fruit knife in my hand clattered to the floor. The apple rolled away, revealing the slightly browned flesh where it had been exposed to the air. Just like my heart, which had just begun to feel a flicker of warmth before being instantly frozen and crushed. The counterfeit's judgment. The next day, the mansion doors opened. Julian Croft, playing the part of the master of the house, walked in with his arm intimately wrapped around Isabel. His eyes immediately fell on me, standing in the living room, wearing his white shirt. In that instant, the warmth and love in his eyes vanished, replaced by an undisguised look of dark resentment and disgust. As if I weren't a person, but a piece of nauseating trash. He let go of Isabel and slowly walked toward me. His steps were measured, carrying an air of scrutiny and amusement. He stood before me, half a head taller, and looked down on me. Then, he picked up the bottle of Aurora's Love from the coffee table, the perfume I had to use every day. He sniffed it, then let out a contemptuous sneer. The next second, he violently swung his arm and smashed the expensive bottle on the floor at my feet. Crash! The dark glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. The amber liquid splashed all over me, the rich fragrance exploding in the air, so thick it was suffocating. Shards of glass flew, some tearing through my pants and leaving small, bloody cuts on my leg. What I hate most, Julian's voice was as cold as a viper's tongue. His people imitating me. Especially, he added, a pathetic imitation. He turned to Isabel, his tone instantly becoming doting, with just the right touch of grievance. Isabel, while I was gone, you relied on this. Counterfeit to think of me? That hurts me a little. I looked at Isabel. I hoped she would say something, even just a look of frown. But she didn't. She was completely lost in the joy of her lover's return, blind to the humiliation I was being subjected to. She even seemed to think Julian's possessive jealousy was a sign of his deep love for her. She walked up to me, took a pre-written check from the butler, and handed it to me. Her voice had returned to the absolute, icy detachment of our first meeting. The contract is terminated. Here's $10 million. It's enough for your sister to get the best surgery, and enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Leave this place and forget everything that happened here. $10 million. What a generous sum. The price to buy out a year of my dignity, to erase all traces of me, the counterfeit. I didn't take the check. I looked into her eyes, where I thought I had once seen a flicker of emotion. Now, it was just a frozen lake, reflecting only Julian Croft's image. My voice was painfully hoarse. What about Leo? I asked. He just started to smile at me. He holds my hand, asked me to tell him stories. Was that part of the contract, too? At the mention of Leo, Isabel's gaze faltered for a second, but she quickly hardened her expression, her voice firm. I will tell him his real father is back. You were just an actor who left the stage early. She paused, her tone laced with the cruel finality of a judge's sentence. This is the price you have to pay. For that face of yours, and for the comfortable life you got from playing my husband for a year. So, in her eyes, the comfortable life I had was payment enough for everything. It compensated for the name I had lost, the life that was stripped from me, and the tiny bit of genuine affection I had just started to feel for a child. I understood. I finally completely understood. A bitter smile spread across my face. I nodded. Okay, I get it. Without another glance at her or the check, I turned and walked out of the magnificent prison that had caged me for a year. My back must have looked pathetic, but I tried my best to make it look resolute. Behind me, I heard Julian wrap his arms around Isabel from behind and whisper in her ear with the triumphant air of a victor, "Darling, thank you for taking out the trash for me." The word trash, like a poison needle, plunged deep into my heart. The abyss's scourge after leaving the mansion. The first thing I did was go to a public bathhouse and scrub myself from head to toe 3 times with the cheapest soap I could find. I wanted to wash away the scent of Aurora's love that had seeped into my very bones. I wanted to wash away every trace of Julian Croft from past year. I wanted to be Caleb Shaw again. But reality quickly slapped me across the face. I found myself blacklisted by the entire industry. My agent, Vince the King Moretti, a middle-aged man who had been struggling at the bottom of the Hollywood food chain for years, was so stressed he was pulling out what little hair he had left. "Caleb, this ain't right," he said, slamming a termination notice on the table. "That supporting role you finally landed in the web series, The one you auditioned so hard for? They called me an hour before the shoot today. Said you've been replaced. I asked around. The guy who took your spot is some new pop idol signed with Apex Global. Word is his backer is that Mr. K who just came back. Julian Croft. My heart sank. Vince was still sighing. And that's not all. I sent your headshot out for a dozen gigs today. All those casting directors who used to be eager to see you are now dodging my calls like I got the plague. I understood. Julian wasn't just cleaning house. He was going to crush me. Crush me like an ant, leaving no trace behind. Vince pulled every string he had, begged every contact he'd ever made, and finally managed to land me a role. An extra in a high fantasy series. A righteous young disciple captured by the great demon lord, who refuses to yield and is then repeatedly whipped to death. It had 3 lines. The shoot was at a film lot on the outskirts of L. It was the dead of winter, and the wind was bitingly cold. I changed into the thin costume and was hoisted up by wires, suspended in midair. The director was a burly man with a permanent scowl, and the look he gave me was filled with impatience and contempt. Are we ready? Let's go. Stop wasting everyone's time. Action. The actor playing the Demon Lord was a moderately famous pop star. He walked up to me, holding a leather whip that had been soaked in water. Caleb, right? He said with false sincerity. Sorry about this, man. For realism's sake, I'm going to have to actually hit you. I nodded. It's fine. Let's do it. Crack. The whip landed, and a searing pain exploded across my back. It really hurt, but I gritted my teeth and delivered my first line. Demon, I would rather die than submit to you. Cut. The director's irritated voice yelled from behind the monitor. Wrong emotion. Again. And so we did a second take, a third, a fourth. I hung there in the air, letting the whip strike my back again and again, the cold wind slicing at my face like a knife. Just as I started going numb, a commotion broke out on set. A black Rolls-Royce slowly drove onto the lot. The door opened, and Julian Croft, surrounded by his entourage, stepped out. He was wearing a black cashmere coat, looking calm and composed, completely out of place in the chaotic and frigid environment. The director immediately scurried over like a sycophant. Mr. Croft, what brings you here? Julian smiled, patting the director's shoulder. Just checking on my investment, seeing how things are going. His gaze passed over the crowd and landed precisely on me, hanging wretchedly in the air. His eyes were filled with cruel satisfaction. He walked over to the director, sat behind the monitor, took a glass of red wine from his assistant, swirled it gently, and then said, "This scene is good. But," he paused, speaking slowly, "the actor's emotion isn't quite there yet. It needs to be real, you understand? You need to make the audience and the actor himself feel that genuine, soul-tearing pain. Only pain," he declared, "can create art." The director immediately understood. He bellowed, "Props. Give me the whip with the barbs on it. Makeup. More blood packs on him." I wanted to look as real as possible. At that moment, my heart sank into an icy abyss. I looked at the man behind the monitor, elegantly sipping his wine, the man I had once imitated countless times. I finally understood. He didn't want to just crush me. He wanted to play with me until I broke. He wanted to watch me at my most painful and desperate, to satisfy his own twisted, sadistic pleasure. Despair in the rainy night that afternoon, I don't know how many times I was whipped. All I knew was that by the end, my costume was stuck to my raw flesh, and every breath sent a wave of fire across my back. Each time I was struck and fell, my consciousness would blur. But each time with my last ounce of strength, I struggled to get back up, or rather, was hoisted back up by the wires. I stared fixedly in Julian Croft's direction. My gaze, initially one of forbearance, shifted to anger, and finally to a defiant, burning flame. You want to see me beg? You want to see me break? I won't give you the satisfaction. Even if Caleb Shaw is just an ant, he's an ant with a spine. The scene didn't wrap until after dark. When they finally let me down, I collapsed onto the ground, not even having the strength to stand. Vince rushed over, his eyes red. He wanted to help me up, but was afraid to touch my wounds. Bastards. Those goddamn bastards, he cursed through gritted teeth. In the distance, Julian was getting into his car to leave. He seemed to notice my gaze and turned, mouthing a word at me from across the set. Counter fight. Then he flashed the elegant smile of a victor, turned, and got into the car. Lying on the cold ground, watching the Rolls-Royce speed away, I suddenly wanted to laugh. I laughed at my own naivety. I once thought that if I just played my part well enough, I could get the money to save my sister and walk away clean. I forgot that in the games of the rich, a disposable tool doesn't get to decide when to exit the stage. When it's used up and no longer amusing, it gets destroyed. The torment on set was just the beginning. The next day, the internet was flooded with negative stories about me. The hashtag Caleb Shook It Out of Hollywood shot to the top of the trending list. Gossip blogs released a slew of my ugly on-set photos. There was a picture of me wincing in pain from the whip with the caption, "D-listers over-the-top acting, can't even control his facial expressions." There was a misleading, out-of-context photo of me helping a female crew member who had almost fallen with the caption, "Shocking. Caleb Shaw sexually harasses female staff on set." And there was a photo of me, after a full day of torture, ravenously eating a meal box in a corner with the caption, "Zero self-awareness as an actor, eats like a homeless person." An invisible hand was pushing all of this. Julian Croft's hand. But what was worse was the celebration of the hashtag #ASJulian shippers. Julian Croft's return from the dead had galvanized this 5-year dormant fanbase, and their fighting power was off the charts. With a nudge from Julian's team, they branded me a shameless stand-in who had desecrated the dead and profaned their love, subjecting me to weeks of relentless cyberbullying. My Twitter was swarmed. My DMs were filled with vicious curses and death threats. They doxed me, and someone spray-painted "Die Faker" and "Scumbag" in red on the door of my small basement apartment. They even found the university my sister, Luna, was attending. Luna Shaw was one of Isabel Vance's most devoted fans. Her bedroom wall was covered with Isabel's posters. Her dream was to one day meet her idol. When she saw the post about her brother on the university's online forum, she was utterly stunned. The post described me as a shameless parasite who would do anything for money, becoming someone's substitute lover and then clinging on even after the real person returned. The post included a photo of me at the mansion gate, begging to see Isabel in the rain. A paparazzi had snapped it and sold it with a sensational headline. "Shameless actor harasses film queen in the rain, demands exorbitant breakup fee." Luna didn't believe it. She called me, crying, "Caleb, the things they're saying online, they're not true, are they?" Her voice was choked with tears. "They said for money, you did those things. You're not that kind of person, right?" Holding the phone, listening to my sister's sobs, my heart was being torn to shreds. How could I explain it to her? Tell her I did it all for her astronomical surgery bills? Tell her that the person I was impersonating was her own idol's long-dead lover? I had no defense. All I could do was repeat, over and over, "Luna, trust me. It's not what they're saying." Then what is it? The idol I admire, and my own brother. Why did it turn into this? "Caleb, just tell me." Just then, I heard a commotion on her end of the line, followed by a girl's scream. Luna, what's wrong? Somebody help." She fainted. The line went dead. I raced to the hospital like a man possessed. The red light of the emergency room was like a bloodthirsty eye, so bright it nearly blinded me. The doctor told me that Luna, due to extreme emotional distress, had suffered an acute cardiac event. Her condition was critical. She needed surgery immediately, and the cost of the surgery was another $500,000. Standing outside the ER, the blood in my veins turned to ice. I was broke. The money I had earned from acting, plus all my savings, had already been spent on her previous treatments. I was blacklisted. I couldn't get any more work. I had hit a dead end. That night, it started to rain again. The cold water beat down on me, on my already shattered heart. I made the most humiliating decision of my life. I swallowed what little pride I had left and went back to the mansion in the Hollywood Hills. I came to beg Isabel Vance, to ask her for an advance, a portion of the salary she had promised me, the one I had left behind. I rang the doorbell. After a long wait, the video call finally connected. On the screen was Isabel's face, still beautiful, but now utterly devoid of warmth. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Soaked by the rain, I looked like a stray dog. I spoke to the screen, my voice pleading, "Ms. Vance, please. My sister is critically ill. She needs money for surgery. The money you mentioned before, could you advance me just a part of it? $500,000, that's all I need." Isabel, on the screen, was silent. Just as I thought she might show a sliver of compassion, Julian Croft's figure appeared behind her. He rested his chin intimately on her shoulder and gave the camera a demonic smile. Then he spoke to Isabel in a pouting tone. "See, Isabel? He's back again. So annoying." Isabel looked at me, and finally, slowly, she uttered the words that cast me into the deepest pit of hell. "Our contract is over. Caleb, I have no obligation to help you anymore." With that, she ended the call. The screen went black. I stood there in the downpour, drenched to the bone, but I couldn't feel the cold, because my heart was already dead. What I didn't know was that in the darkness nearby, the telephoto lens of a camera was aimed right at me, capturing this pathetic, laughable moment. The brink of death in the end, I got the money for my sister's surgery. It was Vince. He sold the only house his parents had left him and took out a loan from a loan shark to scrape together the $500,000. Caleb, I'm not a big shot. This is all I can do, he said over the phone, a man in his 40s, his voice choked with emotion. You have to hang in there. For Luna. And for yourself. You have to survive. I held the phone, tears finally streaming down my face. After being abandoned by the whole world, this was the only warmth I had left. My sister's surgery was a success. Watching her move from the ICU to a regular ward, her complexion growing healthier each day, I felt like I'd been brought back to life myself. To pay Vince back and to survive, I took any job I could get. Hauling bricks at construction sites, washing dishes in restaurants, and doing stunt work. As a stunt double, I took a job for an explosion scene. It was being filmed in an abandoned cave. The director said the scene was a bit dangerous, but it paid well. I accepted without a second thought. On the day of the shoot, I saw an unexpected person on set. Julian Croft. He was there in his usual superior manner, inspecting the set as an investor. A sense of foreboding washed over me. My premonition was correct. Julian found the set's pyrotechnician and secretly gave him a large sum of money. His instructions were simple. Increase the amount of explosives and detonate it 3 seconds early. The pyrotechnician looked at the massive check, hesitated, and then nodded. I knew none of this. All I knew was that, as per the script, I was running out of the cave clutching an important prop when a young actor, new to the industry, froze in place beside me, his legs giving out in fear. I turned back and saw his pale face. In that same instant, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flicker of panic and regret on the pyrotechnician's face. My brain hadn't even processed it before my body reacted instinctively. I lunged forward and shoved the young actor, Danny, hard toward the safe zone outside the cave entrance. Run, was the last word I yelled at him. The next second, boom! A deafening roar. The entire cave shook violently. The explosion, 3 seconds ahead of schedule, went off. Flames and a searing heat wave engulfed me from behind. I felt myself being thrown by an immense force, then slammed hard onto the ground. A burning pain erupted from every part of my body. My consciousness slowly faded into an overwhelming darkness. Before I completely blacked out, the last thought that flashed through my mind was, Vince, I'm sorry. The money from your house. I don't think I can pay it back. The official news came out quickly. Serious accident on film set. Young actor Caleb Shaw dies in the line of duty while saving colleague. Body not recovered. The news broke, and the internet was in an uproar. The netizens who had once viciously attacked me fell silent. The hashtag #ISAJillianShippers went quiet. No one had expected that the person they called a shameless stand-in would end his young life in such a heroic way. Of course, I knew none of this, because while everyone thought I had been turned to ash, a pair of strong hands dragged me out of the rubble. Quick, he's still breathing. A gruff, elderly voice called out amidst the chaos. Notify Director Thorne. We got him. A Blind Heart Awakens Caleb Shaw's memorial service was a simple affair, held in a small hall downstairs from the Zenith Pictures building. Not many people came, just Vince Moretti, a few actors Caleb had worked with, and some reporters who had heard the news. Vince held Caleb's black and white portrait, crying like a child. The young man in the photo had a clean, warm smile, with charming laugh lines at the corners of his eyes. Isabel Vance came. She wore large sunglasses and a face mask, completely concealing herself as she sat silently in a corner in the back row. She told herself she was only there to put a period on this whole affair. After all, Caleb had met his end because of her and Julian. She was just fulfilling a humanitarian duty. The atmosphere was heavy. The MC recited Caleb's unremarkable life story in a somber tone. Mr. Caleb Shaw was a kind and helpful man, brave and selfless. In his final moments, he used his own body to shield a colleague. Listening to these words, Isabel felt an inexplicable irritation. The whole thing felt like a farce. Why did one man's death make her so unsettled? She should feel relieved. The clumsy imitator, the counterfeit who was a constant reminder that Julian was dead, was finally gone for good. She should be happy. So why did her heart feel like it was blocked by something stuffy and aching? Just then, a commotion broke out at the entrance. A small figure stumbled in and ran toward the front of the hall. It was Leo. The nanny, Maria, had secretly brought him. Since seeing the news of Caleb's death, the child had not eaten or spoken a word for 3 days. When watching a movie, Julian Croft prefers sea salt popcorn, but he never eats the broken pieces at the bottom. Maria, at her wit's end, had come up with the idea of letting him see Caleb one last time. Under the stunned gazes of everyone present, Leo ran to the portrait. He tilted his head back, looking at the young man, smiling at him from the photo. Then, this child, who had been diagnosed by specialists as emotionally detached, incapable of perceiving or expressing complex feelings, suddenly opened his mouth. He pointed at Caleb's black and white picture and let out the first and most heart-wrenching cry of his life. "Caleb, liar!" His voice, sharp and hoarse from agitation and weakness, pierced the silence of the hall. You said you would teach me how to make a kite. Come back." Wah! He broke into heaving sobs. It wasn't a programmed display of sadness, not the cry of someone in pain, but a complete and utter breakdown, a wail from the depths of his soul, like a young animal abandoned by the world, letting out its final, mournful cry. Isabel, sitting in the back row, was struck by lightning. Her sunglasses slipped from her nose and fell to the floor with a clatter. She stared at her son, crying his heart out on the floor, her mind a complete blank. She finally understood. Her prosopagnosia, her face blindness, might have kept her from truly seeing Caleb's face, but her son's heart could see him clearly. And her own heart, through countless days and nights spent together, had already memorized the man's warmth, his scent, his off-key nursery rhymes, and his stories of a real, messy childhood. She wasn't face-blind, she was heart-blind. She had trapped herself in the prison of past memories, stubbornly covering her eyes and plugging her ears, refusing to feel anything or anyone beyond Julian Croft. It was she who had personally extinguished the only faint light that had ever shone into the cold world she and her son inhabited. She whipped her head around to look at Julian, who had arrived at the entrance at some point. He was frowning, watching Leo thrashing and crying on the floor, a look of undisguised disgust and impatience in his eyes, as if Leo's cries were some filthy noise defiling his ears. At that moment, for the first time, a tiny crack appeared in the indestructible love Isabel felt for the returned Julian Croft. Fragments of truth. After the memorial, Isabel locked herself in her room. She began to frantically search online for everything about Caleb Shaw. There was precious little information. A poor kid from a small town who had dropped out of school to work and pay for his sister's medical bills, who had taken countless extra roles just to barely cling to the fringes of the entertainment industry. She saw the ugly, fabricated stories and the vicious online abuse. She also saw, buried beneath the hate, a few scattered comments defending him. "Caleb is a really good guy. Last time on set, a prop almost fell on me, and he was the one who pushed me out of the way. I'm Danny, the guy Caleb saved. I can testify that he was a good person. Everything online is slander. He's not like that." But these faint voices were quickly drowned out by the flood of paid trolls. Isabel's heart felt like it was crawling with ants, a dense, stinging pain. She found Vince Moretti's contact information. When he answered her call, Vince was drunk and drowning his sorrows. He cursed her out over the phone, calling her a blind executioner and a venomous bitch, perfectly matched with the snake Julian Croft. Isabel listened without a word. When he had tired himself out, she finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Where is he? I mean, his grave." Vince was silent for a long time before finally giving her the address. The next day, Isabel went to the cemetery alone. Caleb's marker was small, just a black and white photo and his name. It wasn't even a proper grave, just a small niche for his ashes in a columbarium. Vince's house money had only been enough for this small resting place. Isabel stood before it for a long, long time. She remembered the stormy night he had held her feverish son all night. She remembered the morning he had fallen asleep against the headboard from exhaustion, his hand still tightly clutching her son's. She remembered the dark theater, the stiff shoulder he had let her lean on for an entire night. She remembered the last time she saw him, standing in the pouring rain, begging her for $500,000. And she had given him the cruelest refusal. "I'm sorry." Isabel covered her face and finally sank to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. But the person inside the niche could no longer hear her belated apology. From that day on, Isabel changed. She began to obsessively investigate Caleb's past and the truth behind the explosion. She found Vince and saw a copy of the humiliating stand-in contract Caleb had signed to get the surgery money. She went to the dark, damp, 10-square-meter basement apartment where Caleb had lived. Under his bed, she found an old iron box. Inside, there was no money or valuables, only hundreds of letters he had written to his sister, Luna, but had never sent. "Luna, got another role today. Only one line, but it's one step closer to your surgery fund. So happy. No, Luna, I got paid today. Bought you that dress you liked. When you get better, I'll take you to the amusement park. Luna, I met a strange little kid today. He doesn't laugh or cry like a little robot. But today he smiled at me. It was only for 0.1 seconds, but I feel like it was all worth it. Each letter was full of hope for the future and encouragement for his sister. Every word was like a red-hot coal, searing her heart, the pain so intense she could barely breathe. She also began to subtly probe Julian, asking about the details of the explosion. Julian's answers were flawless, leaving no room for suspicion. But the paranoia and intense control issues in his personality began to surface. He would check her phone, restrict her social interactions, and fly into a rage if she spoke for too long with a male director. He was no longer the sunny young man from her memories. He had become a beautiful, ornate cage, locking her in tighter and tighter, suffocating her. The crack in Isabel's heart widened. She began to suspect that the car crashed 5 years ago and his return 5 years later held secrets she didn't know. She began to miss him. She missed the young man who always smelled of Aurora's love. She missed the clumsy but real childhood stories he told. She missed the sight of his back, awkward but gentle, as he held her son. She realized that, without her knowing, the counterfeit had carved a deeper mark on her heart than the original ever had. The King's Return. 1 year later. The Berlin International Film Festival. As one of the world's top 3 film festivals, its closing ceremony drew global attention. The biggest suspense of the night was the winner of the Golden Bear for Best Film and the Silver Bear for Best Actor. A little-known Mandarin-language film, Echoes of the Abyss, became the night's biggest dark horse. Directed by the legendary Marcus Thorne, who had come out of retirement, it told the story of a man from the bottom rungs of society who, after suffering injustice and betrayal, claws his way back from the brink of destruction to find self-redemption. The film style was gritty and realistic, with a powerful emotional impact. In the end, Echoes of the Abyss won the prestigious Golden Bear for Best Film. The audience erupted, but an even bigger shock was yet to come. The winner of the Silver Bear for Best Actor also came from the cast of Echoes of the Abyss. When the presenter read the winner's name, everyone was stunned. Chun, a completely unknown name. Under the confused gazes of the audience, a tall, well-built Asian man stood up from his seat. Dressed in a tailored black suit, he walked steadily to the stage. The globally broadcast camera zoomed in for a close-up of his face. It was a handsome face, one that told story. The contours were vaguely familiar, but his aura had undergone a seismic shift. His eyes were no longer the clean, clear eyes of his youth, but were now deep and serene, like a calm sea after a violent storm. A faint, winding scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone. Far from marring his looks, the scar added a deadly combination of brokenness and strength to his appeal. Back home, everyone in the entertainment industry watching the live broadcast went insane. Vince Moretti was squatting at a street-side stall, eating instant noodles. When he saw the man on the screen, his chopsticks clattered to the ground, and tears instantly welled in his eyes. Caleb, it's Caleb. He's not dead. He stammered, overwhelmed with emotion. Chloe Reed was doing yoga at home. When she saw that face, she fell right off her mat. Holy shit, he came back from the dead. And Julian Croft was in his office, leisurely sipping red wine. When he saw the familiar face on the screen, the smile on his own face froze. He violently smashed his wine glass on the floor, red liquid and glass shards scattering everywhere. Caleb Shaw, he roared, his eyes filled with disbelief and monstrous hatred. Isabel saw it too. She was watching a cartoon with Leo when the breaking news interrupted. When she saw that face, heard that fluent English acceptance speech, she froze completely, the remote control slipping from her hand. On the stage, the man called Chun accepted the Silver Bear Trophy, the symbol of the Best Actor Award. He stood in the spotlight on the world stage, delivering his acceptance speech in fluent English. First, I want to thank the Berlin Film Festival and the jury. I also want to thank my director, Mr. Marcus Thorne. He was the one who pulled me out of the abyss. His calm gaze met the camera, as if it could pierce through the screen and see into everyone's hearts. Finally, I want to thank the abyss itself. Because it was the abyss, he said, that showed me the light. Caleb Shaw, he was back, in a manner no one could have ever imagined. The domestic entertainment industry completely imploded. A cold reunion. The news of Caleb Shaw's return was a bombshell that sent shockwaves across the country. The airport was mobbed by reporters and fans who had rushed to the scene. He was no longer the D-list nobody that people could bully. He was the Berlin Best Actor, director Marcus Thorne's new protege, the center of attention, Chun. Vince Moretti, wearing his most expensive suit, his face flushed with excitement, struggled to clear a path for Caleb with the help of bodyguards. Make way. Please make way. No interviews. Thank you, everyone. Caleb wore sunglasses, his expression serene as he walked through the crowd. Behind him was a professional management team, personally arranged for him by Director Thorne. Outside the airport's VIP exit, a black luxury van was waiting. Standing by the car was a familiar figure, Isabel Vance. She didn't even know how she got there. The moment she saw the news, her mind had gone blank, and her body had moved on its own. She had to see him, right now, immediately. She wanted to ask him what he had been through this past year. She wanted to say she was sorry. She was dressed to the nines, with flawless makeup and the latest Chanel suit, standing there like a rose in full bloom. However, Caleb's footsteps stopped 3 meters away from her. He took off his sunglasses, revealing those deep eyes. His gaze swept past her, without pause or ripple, as if he were looking at a complete stranger. Then, he turned to Director Marcus Thorne, who was standing beside her, and offered a polite, detached smile. Director Thorne, allow me to introduce you. His voice was deeper than before, with a captivating magnetic quality. This is Ms. Isabel Vance, a senior in the industry. Ms. Vance. Those 2 words were like an invisible chasm, separating them completely. The color drained from Isabel's face. She had prepared a dozen opening lines and imagined 1,000 reunion scenarios, but she had never anticipated this. He wouldn't even spare her an extra word. Director Thorne glanced at Isabel's pale face, then at Caleb's expressionless one, a knowing glint in his worldly eyes. He chuckled to break the tension. Oh, it's Isabel. Long time no see. You're looking more beautiful than ever. After the brief pleasantry, Caleb gave Isabel a slight nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, and then turned and got into the van without looking back. The door closed mercilessly behind him. Isabel stood there, watching the black van disappear, leaving behind only a cloud of exhaust. She felt like a joke that had been meticulously prepared, only to fall flat. Pathetic and miserable. A gentle rejection. Caleb's homecoming celebration was a grand affair. Everyone who was anyone in the entertainment industry was there. Isabel received an invitation, personally delivered by Director Thorne. She knew it was the director's way of offering her an olive branch. At the party, Caleb, dressed in a white suit, was the center of attention. He moved effortlessly among directors and producers, his conversation elegant and his demeanor poised. The faint scar on his handsome face only added to his mature charm. Isabel stood in a corner, holding a glass of champagne, watching him from afar. She tried several times to gather the courage to approach him, but she was always blocked by the throng of people surrounding him. She realized a vast distance now separated them. He was no longer the stand-in she could summon and dismiss at will. He was the light, and she was losing the right to even get close. Finally, she found an opening. Caleb was standing alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. Isabel took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and walked over. Caleb, Chun, she said, her voice strained. Even saying his name felt like it burned her tongue. Caleb turned. Seeing her, his eyes showed no surprise. He just gave a soft as a response. Congratulations, Isabel said, trying to make her voice sound natural. I saw your film. Your performance was incredible. Thank you. Caleb's reply was polite and distant. The atmosphere once again lapsed into an awkward silence. Isabel's hand gripped her champagne glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. She summoned all the courage she had, looked him in the eye, and said, for what happened before, I am sorry. Caleb looked at her for a long time. So long that Isabel thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he suddenly smiled. It was a faint smile, tinged with an unreadable irony. You're too kind, Ms. Vance, he said. What we had was a fair transaction. You paid, I worked. We both got what we wanted. There's no need for apologies. As for what happened later, he paused, picking up a glass of wine from a nearby table and taking a sip. That was my own choice. It had nothing to do with you. So, you don't need to apologize. Every word he spoke was like a scalpel, precisely cutting through the flimsy layer of warmth between them, revealing the cold, bloody reality of their transaction. He was severing all ties between them. He didn't even deign to hate her, because hate requires caring, and he no longer cared at all. His words pierced Isabel's heart, leaving it in tatters. She wanted to say more, but Caleb had already turned to greet another director who had come to offer a toast. He didn't look back at her once. It was as if her heartfelt apology was just an insignificant monologue he hadn't even heard. A silent response. Isabel's first attempt at winning him back ended in spectacular failure. She wasn't ready to give up. On the advice of her friend Chloe Reed, she decided to try a different approach, a public apology. She called a press conference under her own name. No special guests, no new projects to promote. Just her alone in front of a forest of cameras and microphones. I asked you all here today to make a public statement and an apology regarding some events from a year ago. She took a deep breath and then bowed 90 degrees to the cameras. A year ago, due to my own personal failings, I caused irreparable harm to the actor Mr. Caleb Shaw. For that, I offer my most sincere apologies to Mr. Shaw and to everyone who cares about him. I was blind. I failed to distinguish right from wrong, and I allowed malice to fester. To atone for my mistake, I have decided to dedicate 50% of my personal studio's profits for the next 3 years to establish a foundation in Caleb Shaw's name, to support young, talented actors like him. Her words created a media firestorm. The hashtag Isabel apologizes to Caleb exploded on social media. Public opinion began to shift. People speculated about what had really happened between them a year ago, and Isabel's self-damaging public apology earned her a fair amount of sympathy. Everyone expected Caleb's side to make at least a polite response, but there was nothing. Caleb's Twitter was silent. His management team issued no statement. It was as if Isabel's grand, dramatic apology had been a punch thrown into a pillow. It made no sound at all. Still undeterred, Isabel moved on to her third tactic, leveraging her influence. She used all her connections to push a global endorsement deal from a top-tier luxury brand in front of Caleb. It was the kind of deal every celebrity would kill for. When Vince got the news, he was so excited he almost fell to his knees. Caleb, holy crap, it's that brand. They specifically asked for you to be their global ambassador. Do you know what this means? This means you've hit the big time. Caleb was reading a script. He didn't even look up. He just calmly turned a page and said, "Vince, turn it down for me." What? Vince thought he had misheard. Turn it down? Are you insane? Tell them. Caleb's voice was placid. I don't wear their clothes. Vince was stunned. He suddenly remembered that this brand had been Julian Croft's favorite, and Isabel had been its Asian Pacific brand ambassador for years. Caleb was, in his own quiet way, rejecting all of Isabel's olive branches. He refused to wear her clothes, refused to walk the path she had walked, refused to be associated with her in any way. He was drawing the clearest possible line between himself and the past. The film Queen's Confession. Time flew by, and soon it was the end of the year. The Aegis Awards, the country's most prestigious film awards, were about to hold their ceremony. Caleb, for his explosive performance in Echoes of the Abyss, was nominated for Best Actor without any suspense. And Isabel, for her outstanding role in an art house film, was nominated for Best Actress. On the night of the ceremony, the stars shone brightly. Caleb and Isabel became the center of attention. The media's cameras constantly shifted between them, trying to capture any hint of an interaction. But there was zero communication between them. Their seats were arranged miles apart, and their red carpet arrivals were deliberately staggered. It was as if an unspoken agreement existed to avoid each other at all costs. The final results were no surprise. Caleb won the Aegis Award for Best Actor. Isabel won the Aegis Award for Best Actress. When Isabel's name was announced, all the cameras instinctively turned to Caleb in the audience. He had a polite smile on his face as he applauded gently. His expression was courteous and appropriate, betraying no extra emotion. Isabel, in a moon-white gown, walked slowly to the stage. She accepted the trophy from the presenter and stood before the microphone. Everyone assumed she would give the standard official acceptance speech, thanking the Academy, the director, the cast, and crew. But she didn't. She held the trophy, her gaze cutting through the crowd to land precisely on the man in the white suit sitting in the audience. Her eyes began to redden. I have many people to thank for being able to stand here tonight, she began, her voice trembling slightly as it carried through the auditorium. But today, the person I want to thank most isn't one of them. I want to thank one person. A year ago, I lost him. In the most foolish, most cruel way. The entire hall fell silent. Everyone held their breath, listening to the new Best Actress's unconventional speech. There was something wrong with my eyes. They kept me from seeing many things clearly. I always thought that by living in the past, in my memories, I could find salvation. But I was just a coward. I used memory as an excuse to hurt the only person who tried to pull me out of the darkness. Tears finally streamed down her cheeks. Caleb Shaw. She finally said his name in front of the entire nation. My eyes couldn't see, but my heart could feel. Before, you lived as a shadow. Now, She looked at the man in the audience, whose body had visibly stiffened, and with all the strength she possessed, she made an almost humble plea. Please, give me one more chance. Let me be your shadow. Is that okay? The statement was like an atomic bomb dropped on a calm lake. The hall was dead silent for a full 3 seconds. Then, thunderous applause erupted. Everyone was stunned, moved by the film queen's brave and humble confession. Flashbulbs went off like a frenzy. Every camera was aimed at Caleb. Everyone wanted to see how he would react. Caleb sat in his seat, his eyes downcast. No one could see that his hands, resting on his knees, were clenched into tight fists, the veins on their backs bulging. No one could see that his eyes, too, were red-rimmed. After a long moment, he slowly raised his head and looked at the woman on stage, weeping. Finally, he simply joined the people around him and applauded. No response, no nod, no shake of the head. And so, with the gentlest silence, he gave her the cruelest rejection. A frantic cage after the Aegis Awards. Isabel's confession of the century and Caleb's silent response became the biggest topic in entertainment for the next month. Public opinion began to lean heavily in Isabel's favor. OMG, she's being so humble. He's still not forgiving her after all that. Isn't Caleb being a little too cruel? Whatever happened, a girl begged you in front of the whole country. All you saying to just shut up. Do you have any idea what he went through? Why does he have to forgive her? The internet was a war zone. In the real world, Julian Croft's status was being seriously threatened by Caleb. He was once the untouchable myth of the industry, but the returned Caleb was now on the verge of surpassing him in acting awards, talent, and international influence. This sent the extremely narcissistic and paranoid Julian into an unprecedented crisis. And Isabel's public confession was the final straw. He felt betrayed. The canary he had so carefully caged had just declared her love for another man in front of the entire world. This was something he absolutely could not tolerate. His paranoia and madness reached their peak. He put Isabel under house arrest. He took her phone, cut off all her contact with the outside world, and locked her in the magnificent mansion. Isabel, have you forgotten? You belong to me, he said, pinching her chin, his eyes dangerously dark. I don't care if that Caleb Shaw is dead or alive. You, Isabel Vance, are my woman in life, and you will be my ghost in death. Isabel looked at the familiar yet strange face before her, feeling a bone-deep fear for the first time. Julian, you're insane. Yes, I am insane. Julian laughed maniacally. I've been insane for you for 5 years. I thought about you every single day in that sunless dungeon. How do you think I survived? It was my obsession with you. So, you are not allowed to betray me. Absolutely not. He threatened her with Leo, demanding she immediately hold a press conference and issue a statement to cut all ties with Caleb. Otherwise, he whispered in her ear, his voice chillingly low, I can't guarantee that something won't happen to that little bastard. He actually called his own son a bastard. Isabel's heart turned to ice. She looked at the man before her and finally understood. He had never loved her. He only loved the idea of possessing Isabel Vance. He enjoyed the absolute control, the ownership. As they argued fiercely, neither of them noticed that on the landing of the second-floor staircase, little Leo was standing quietly, holding a tablet. He had just clearly recorded the entire tirade from Julian. The fatal livestream, the argument between Julian and Isabel, ended with Julian backing down. Not because of a change of heart, but because his PR team advised him that forcing Isabel to issue a statement now would only backfire. The best strategy was to let time cool things down, then release news of their reconciliation, an opportune moment to put an end to all speculation. Julian, though paranoid, was not stupid. He took the advice. A tense peace settled over the mansion, but a storm was brewing beneath the surface. Isabel knew she had to find a way to save herself. She secretly contacted Chloe Reed. The two women began to plan a counterattack. An opportunity soon presented itself. Julian's company was hosting a massive online livestream gala, featuring all of its artists. As the lady of the company, Isabel was, of course, expected to attend. Halfway through the event, there was a segment where the host would connect live to Julian's home, allowing him, Isabel, and Leo to present the image of a happy family to the audience. This was a show carefully orchestrated by Julian. He wanted to declare to the world that Isabel was his. The live stream began. On screen, Julian, wearing a cozy sweater, smiled as he wrapped his arm around Isabel's shoulders. Leo sat quietly beside them, playing with a Rubik's Cube. Everything looked warm and harmonious. Julian, seeing your happy family, we're all so envious, the host said with a smile. The smile on Julian's face deepened. Yes, Isabel and Leo are the most precious treasures in my life. I would do anything for them. He spoke with deep affection, as if he were the best husband and father in the world. Isabel smiled, but said nothing. Under the table, her hand quietly pressed a button on her phone. It was the signal she had arranged with Chloe. The next second, the live stream feed suddenly switched. An audio recording, broadcast using technology Chloe had prepared, was played for everyone to hear. It was Julian's insane, vicious rant. I want us to die together. You, Isabel Vance, are my woman in life, and you will be my ghost in death. I can't guarantee that something won't happen to that little bastard. The recording played, and the entire live stream exploded. Tens of millions of viewers heard the exchange. Everyone was stunned. On camera, the smile on Julian Croft's face froze, and all the color drained from his face. He never imagined Isabel would pull a stunt like this. He whipped his head around to look at her, his eyes filled with murderous rage. But Isabel just looked at him calmly. Just then, Leo, who had been silent the whole time, put down his Rubik's Cube. He looked up at the ashen-faced Julian, and, in a tone that was chillingly calm for his age, he said, clearly and deliberately, "You are not my father. My father died 5 years ago, in that car crash." He paused, a look akin to reminiscence appearing on his small face for the first time. He said, and it was clear who he meant, was the one who taught me what like means. And he was the one who taught me what heartache is. The young boy's declaration, a veritable fatal blow, was broadcast across the entire internet. Julian Croft's meticulously crafted persona of a devoted, loving man crumbled to dust in that instant. He was utterly and completely finished. The lights embraced Caleb saw the live stream too. He was in the middle of a taping for a major national talk show. During a commercial break, Vince burst in, holding his phone excitedly. "Caleb, look, something huge just happened." Caleb saw the recording, and he saw Leo's calm declaration. His heart was a mix of complicated emotions. He never expected Isabel to sever ties with Julian in such a decisive way. He especially never expected that the little boy who couldn't laugh or cry would still remember him. The second half of the talk show began. The host, clearly aware of the explosive news, looked at Caleb with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. She carefully guided the conversation toward his past with Isabel. "Chin, we all know that between you and Best Actress Vance, there is some complicated history." Caleb was silent for a moment. He knew this was the perfect opportunity to respond to everything. He looked at the camera and spoke calmly. "Actually, it's not that complicated. It's like someone who chases the light for too long and starts to think they've become the light too. But then they realize they were just a shadow, illuminated by the light. When the real light returns, the shadow is supposed to disappear." He recounted his hellish past in a near tranquil tone. His voice was soft, but it carried a power that moved everyone watching. The entire country felt for him. Everyone thought the story would end there. A wronged shadow who, through his own efforts, became his own light. And the one who had wronged him had received her just deserts. It was a perfectly satisfying just ending. Just then, the door to the studio was suddenly thrown open from the outside. A figure stumbled in. It was Isabel. She was still wearing the clothes from her live stream. Her hair was a mess, and her face was streaked with tears. She ignored all the frantic staff trying to stop her and ran madly toward the stage. Under the stunned gazes of the studio and the entire national audience, she threw her arms around the man sitting on the couch from behind, holding him with all her might. Her face was pressed tightly against his back, as if she was using every last bit of her strength. She cried out the words she most wanted to say. "No, you are not a shadow. You are my light. I was blind before. I was a monster. Caleb, now, let me be your shadow, please." Caleb's body went rigid. He could feel her hot tears soaking through his shirt, her body trembling violently against his back. The studio cameras faithfully recorded the moment. In a close-up shot, a single tear slowly traced a path from the corner of Caleb's eye. Finally, he lifted his hand and gently covered hers, which were still wrapped tightly around him. The redemption of Light and Shadow the live stream, dubbed the reunion of the century, crashed servers nationwide. The story that followed was what everyone had hoped for. Julian Croft was formally arrested by the police on multiple charges, including suspicion of aggravated assault for the car crash 5 years ago, corporate fraud, and unlawful imprisonment. The seemingly indestructible financial empire he had built collapsed overnight. Caleb, due to the extreme emotional shock triggering old injuries from the explosion, was hospitalized for observation. Isabel canceled all her work to stay by his bedside, never leaving his side. She peeled apples for him, cooked for him, and read in the news. She was as clumsy as a first-year intern. Caleb remained silent, just watching her quietly. The day before he was discharged, he finally spoke. "Isabel," he said, looking at her with a complex expression, "I forgive you." Tears instantly streamed down Isabel's face. But Caleb continued, "The way we started was wrong. Everything was built on a flawed foundation. So, I don't want to be with you in this muddled way. I want to start over." Isabel was stunned, not understanding what he meant. Caleb looked at her, a genuine, gentle smile gracing his lips for the first time. "Hello, Ms. Isabel Vance. My name is Caleb Shaw. I'm an actor, and I would like to formally court you." From that day on, Caleb truly began to court Isabel. He was no longer the shadow imitating Julian Croft. He took her to experience his own life. He took her to his favorite hole-in-the-wall ramen shop and ordered an extra-large, extra-spicy bowl that made Isabel's eyes water, but she couldn't stop eating. He took her back to the old tenement building and told her all the embarrassing stories of his childhood with his sister. He took her to meet Luna, the recovered Luna. Seeing her idol holding hands with her brother, was so excited she nearly had another heart attack. In the process, Isabel completely let go of her triple award-winning actress persona. She would wear a $10 t-shirt to wander through night markets with Caleb, fight him for the first bite of a roasted sweet potato, and laugh until she cried at one of his terrible jokes. She smiled like the most ordinary, happiest child. 1 year later, in an ancient castle surrounded by blue roses, Caleb and Isabel held a magnificent wedding. At the ceremony, Caleb knelt on one knee to place the ring on Isabel's finger. He looked at her with deep affection and said, "Hello, Ms. Isabel Vance. I am your suitor, Caleb Shaw. Will you marry me?" Isabel cried so hard her makeup ran, nodding vigorously. "I will. I will be Caleb Shaw's #1 fan for life." Leo, dressed in a handsome little tuxedo, served as the ring bearer, marching solemnly down the aisle. He looked at the kissing couple, and a huge, brilliant smile spread across his usually expressionless face. 2 years later, on a sunny afternoon, on a lawn in the countryside, Caleb was holding a cherubic little girl, playing and lifting her high in the air. The little girl's laughter was like the chiming of silver bells. Nearby, Isabel was flying a kite with a much taller Leo. The kite soared high in the sky. Caleb walked over to Isabel, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and kissed her forehead. "You see," he said softly, "the light came, and the shadow became a part of the light." Isabel turned, smiled, and stood on her toes to press a kiss to his lips. "No," she said, "you were never a shadow. You were always the light." Under the sun, the shadows of the family of four stretched long, huddled closely together. The director's perfect script, epilogue. The noise of the wedding has faded. The guests, filled with blessings for this fairy tale romance, have disappeared into the night. The castle has returned to its ancient tranquility. Only the cold moonlight spills onto the terrace of my and Isabel's bridal suite. Isabel is already asleep. She rests on my arm, her breathing even and steady. The corners of her eyes are still damp with happy tears, but her lips are curved in a slight smile. She must be having a sweet dream. A dream, perhaps, of our future. A flawless future of redemption, forgiveness, and love. I lower my head and place a gentle kiss on her smooth forehead. My movements are so tender they could melt steel. She seems to sense it, unconsciously snuggling closer into my embrace, like a cat that has found its safest harbor. So lovely. My wife, Isabel Vance. The Triple Crown actress, a shareholder of Zenith Pictures, a myth in the hearts of countless people. And now, she is mine. Along with her fame, status, wealth, and the heart I so carefully repaired and reshaped. I gently slide my arm out from under her and walk out to the terrace, pouring myself a glass of bourbon. The amber liquid swirls in the crystal glass, reflecting my face. This face, after the repairs from that accident, now has a bit more character. The scar at the corner of my eye, especially. Isabel always says it's proof of my honor. An honor? No. It's a prop. The most effective, eye-catching prop in my entire script. I take a sip of the bourbon. The sharp liquid slides down my throat, igniting a flicker of pleasure. In my mind, this system interface that has accompanied me for so long slowly materializes. Except, it was never called the Professional Stand-In Survival Guide. Its real name is the Apex Strategy. Final mission. The perfect lover, complete. Objective. Fully acquire the trust, love, and total assets of the target, Isabel Vance. Completion rate. 100% system evaluation. S+ grade. A perfect performance. Congratulations, director. I look at the cold, electronic text, the smile on my lips turning grimly satisfied in the unseen darkness. Yes, director, that is my true identity. And Caleb Shaw was just the most successful role I ever created for myself. This story was never about a stand-in's triumphant return or a woman's desperate pursuit of forgiveness. It was a meticulously planned script, a long and brilliant one-man show that I wrote, directed, and starred in. The story began 6 years ago. Back then, I was just an unknown, poor student at a film academy. And Isabel Vance and Julian Croft were already the two brightest stars in the sky. I saw her on set for the first time, rehearsing lines with Julian. The way she looked at him, that undisguised, pure adoration and worship, stabbed into my heart like a poison needle. Why? Why are some people born with everything, while I, with all my talent and ambition, was left to struggle in the mud? I was not content with that. From that day on, Isabel Vance became my target. I began to study her obsessively, study Julian Croft. I analyzed their personalities, their preferences, their seemingly unbreakable bond. I discovered that Julian was her weakness, the sole pillar of her emotional world. To get her, I first had to become him, or rather, become a version of him that she could not bear to part with even more. The car crash was the first great gift the heavens sent me. Julian Croft's death gave me the perfect point of entry. And so, Phase 1 the Apex strategy officially began. I used all my savings, even took out high-interest loans to undergo a series of precise plastic surgeries in South Korea. I showed the surgeon thousands of photos of Julian, demanding he adjust my face to a golden ratio, 70% similarity, 30% my own. It couldn't be too similar. That would be a clumsy imitation and would arouse suspicion. Nor could it be too different, or I'd never get my foot in the door. The 70% similarity was my key. The 30% difference was the deep foundation I laid for reclaiming my identity later. My sister's illness was real, but to me, it was also a prop. A perfect prop to make my motivations seem pure and sympathetic. When I showed up at the Zenith Pictures casting call with this face, I knew the fish had taken a bait. That stand-in contract, which others saw as a humiliating deed of sale, was my ticket to paradise. Playing Julian Croft? No, that wasn't acting. That was my craft. I can perfectly replicate any award-winning actor's performance in 10 minutes. Imitating a dead man whose every habit was already documented was child's play for me. That internal monologue system? That was just my director's notes. It gave me real-time feedback on which line I flubbed, which expression was off, which gesture was OOC. It was my monitor to ensure my performance was always on point. Winning over Leo was the second and most crucial step. I knew Isabel's heart was frozen solid. A direct approach would be inefficient, but her son, the child with emotional detachment disorder, was her only weakness, the perfect breach in her defenses. I read every study on the disorder. I knew that such children are unmoved by perfectly crafted, false stories. What they need is real, clumsy, even flawed warmth. So, I told them about my impoverished childhood, the stories of climbing trees, and catching fish. Every story was meticulously designed to evoke his most primitive emotional resonance. That stormy night was the opportunity one had been patiently waiting for. I knew from the weather forecast about the severe storm, and I had already learned about Leo's history of gastroenteritis. His fever, his vomiting, it was all within my script. I performed the perfect drama of the clumsy guardian under the watch of the security cameras. I knew that on the other side of the world, Isabel would be watching. That night's performance was worth more than 100 movie roles. Julian Croft's return was the first climax of my script. I'll admit, that was unexpected. It was an accident, a highly challenging variable. But what I do best is turn accidents into part of my script. His return didn't destroy my plan. On the contrary, it made it even more perfect, because his presence was necessary to push my tragedy to its absolute extreme. Only by being crushed under his foot, tortured to within an inch of my life, would Isabel's future regret and guilt reach their peak. That whipping scene on set? I enjoyed it. With every lash of the whip, I felt not pain, but exhilaration. I knew that behind the monitor, Julian was savoring my suffering, and in the shadows, the old director Marcus Thorne, already won over by my acting, was admiring my indomitable spirit. Every pained grunt, every defiant glare, was paving the way for my future kingly return. As for the explosion, do you really think it was Julian's plot? No, that was my work too. I was the one who anonymously leaked my filming schedule to Julian's assistant. I was the one who provoked him with my words, making him believe that only my complete disappearance could give him peace of mind. I was the one who bribed the pyrotechnician. I gave him some money to increase the explosive charge, and I gave him another sum to ensure he detonated it after I had pushed Annie to safety. I needed a death, a heroic, tragic death that would make everyone mourn for me, because only by dying once could my rebirth be sufficiently shocking. Only by becoming a martyr pitted by all could Isabel's guilt ferment into a love so strong it would overwhelm her reason. Everything after that fell into place. With Marcus Thorne's help, I faked my death, went abroad for treatment and study, and reinvented myself. The Berlin Best Actor Award was the most magnificent armor I prepared for myself. When I returned as Chun, I knew my script was entering its final act. I was cold, distant. I rejected her apologies, ignored her gestures. I returned everything she had done to me, twofold. This wasn't revenge. It was a calculated game of push and pull. I know human nature. The more you can't have something, the more desperately you want it. The colder I was, the more it ignited her desire to conquer me. Her confession at the Aegis Awards? I had anticipated it. I had led her to that stage, step by step. And my silent applause from the audience was a stroke of genius. In that moment, the tables were completely turned. I was no longer the one chasing the light. I had become the flame that she, a moth, would fly into. And now I have one. I have won everything I ever wanted. I look at the sleeping woman in my arms. Her face, once as cold as ice, is now filled with dependence and adoration for me. Do I love her? Perhaps. In the way a director loves his most perfect creation. In the way a chess master admires his checkmated opponent. It is the pleasure of conquest, the satisfaction of being in complete control. As for that worldly, pure, unconditional love, that kind of thing only exists in the script I wrote for Isabel. I gently stroke her long hair, my eyes devoid of love, holding only a cold, appreciative smile. My dear Isabel, you will never know. Everything that moved you, everything you fell in love with, everything you cherish. It was all just the greatest performance of my life. The end.